Now, NATO fits into this, and you'll see this if you're from Chicago when you see the NATO leaders arrive here in about 6 weeks' time. NATO is vital to the United States of America. And when I say vital, we can't live without it. We're about to celebrate the 63rd anniversary of the alliance, April 4th of this year. It's the most important alliance to which we've ever belonged in the history of the United States. It's the most powerful alliance in some ways that has ever been created in human history. And it's got a great track record. Now, I don't want to say that NATO won the Cold War. The people of Central Europe and the people of the former Soviet Union, they won the Cold War because they took the risks in 1989 and 1990 and 91 and in decades prior to that. And some of those people are here today with us, representing their countries as new members of NATO. 10 of those countries, thank goodness, are now part of our alliance. But NATO still matters greatly. And the reason I say that is because, you know, cynics and critics will say, well, NATO's that old, musty institution that helped to win the Cold War. Why do we need it in 2012? And the reason we need it is because Europe still matters greatly to the United States. And the reason I bring up that point is because the President made a very important speech in Canberra in mid-November when he was on his Asia trip, where he said, and Secretary Clinton talked about this as well, the United States is now going to focus as a priority on Asia and the Asia-Pacific region. And it's hard to argue with that because the rise of China is probably the most consequential issue of our time. And there's a lot of good in the rise of China, but there's a lot that we have to fear, perhaps, about the rise of China. And the fact that China, India, Indonesia, Australia are providing most of the global growth right now, the emerging economies, the fact that the strongest militaries in the world will be in Asia in the future means that we, a Pacific nation, right now the guarantor of power in Asia, have to be smart and present, and the President was right to suggest that's the central arena of American engagement, because we are witnessing quite an historic change of power shifting from the last 300 or 400 years where it's focused, the locus of global power has been the Mediterranean and Western Europe. It's surely now going to be the Indian Ocean, the Western Pacific, and Asia. The problem is not the policy. The problem maybe is in how people have described it. We're pivoting to Asia, but that means we're pivoting away from someplace else. And in my conversations with Europeans, including last weekend in Brussels at a major conference, I get the feeling that Europeans are pretty upset about this. Because if you say your priority is here and not where it's always been since the beginning of American history, Europe's been the focal point of our efforts since the beginning of the Republic, then you're sending a message to the Europeans you don't want to send. And I'm not saying that the administration's doing this, but now we talk about it in academia and the blogosphere and the press. Suddenly this pivot has taken on a life of its own. And I'd like to suggest simply that Europe still matters. And it is a place of vital importance to the United States. And NATO remains our vital institution.